Welcome to the City of Laguna Niguel Military Support Committee's 5th Annual Veterans Day Ceremony.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I wanted to just start out by giving a little background on Veterans Day. I know some of you already know this, but I looked it up again and had a few notes. In November of 1918, Woodrow Wilson declared November 11th as Armistice Day. And as you may know, it was the 11th month of the 11th hour of the 11th day at 11/11 that the armistice was declared at World War I. In 1926, Congress passed a resolution making November 11th the recurring anniversary of November 1908, which should be commemorated with Thanksgiving and prayer and exercises designed to perpetuate peace through goodwill and mutual understanding among nations. In 1938, the name was changed from Armistice Day to Veterans Day because they wanted to honor people more than just those who had served in World War I. Britain, France, Australia, and Canada commemorate veterans of World War I and II near this date. And so this is a worldwide anniversary. Veterans Day honors all veterans who have served and their living and dead during war or peace. So this is a day of commemorating all veterans.
Today is a special day for those who have worn the uniform of the Armed Forces of the United States of America. It is Veterans Day. This day is set aside for all others to honor the men and women who serve the cause of defending our freedom and protecting our way of life as an Americans.
This particular date has significance. Less than a century ago, the 11th of November was the end of the war to end all wars. This was the First World War, fought across the world, but mostly bitterly waged in the fields of mainland Europe. The armistice, or end of fighting, came at 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918. For years after, it came to be called Armistice Day.
This armistice was the end of a ghastly war, more than 4 years that took the lives of tens of millions of people in terrible ways. Nobody could imagine that there would ever be another such war, as no sane leader would ever risk the possibility of such military conflict again.
Sadly, the world cannot depend upon sane leadership. Within the next 21 years, another global war was underway. Vengeful losers were eager to direct their fury against the civilized world. It came down to the willpower of free people to overcome the challenge of fanatical forces determined to make slaves of them or worse.
Ultimately, the armed forces of the Allies defeating these tyrants by fighting the enemy and beating them. After 6 years and tens of millions of lives lost, the world saw the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. The battlefields went silent, and the smoke cleared as a graceful nation welcomed home their heroes.
Following this epic conflict, however, came a different type of conflict that was fought without the widespread shooting and bombing of the previous global wars. This was called the Cold War. It was a dangerous and terrifying period of history as well, and lasted for 46 years. Once again, it was our military members that allowed our way of life to prevail against the threat of global communism and the destruction of freedom.
During the Cold War, hot conflicts were fought. The first hot conflict was in Korea, between the Communist North and the Free South. The Korean War lasted for 4 years, and the United States fought from start to finish. When our soldiers left the Korean peninsula, the Free South was secure.
The second hot conflict was in Vietnam, between the Communist North and the Free South. For the U.S., the Vietnam War lasted more than a decade. The United States left with a treaty in place, but 2 years later, the North conquered the South. It would take another 15 years and the collapse of the Soviet Union to offset this outcome. The American people, however, continue to owe a large debt of gratitude to its veterans from this bitter time.
As the Cold War was ending in 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The United States chose to learn its lessons from Vietnam and to launch a liberation campaign with overwhelming force of arms. This was called Desert Storm. The ground war lasted only 100 hours, and Kuwait was free. America felt a surge of pride with victory in the Gulf War.
For the past 14 years, our armed forces have fought against terrorists and terrifying fanatics around the world. Our freedom today is owed to those who have shouldered a weapon in our nation's defense. Now we shall hear from a few of those who have served our nation during wartime. Please help us to honor these veterans who join us today on their holiday to share their stories with us.
This is Charles L. Johnson. That's his high school yearbook picture on the left, and on the right, the last known picture of him as he went into combat in the South Pacific during World War II. He was reported missing in action in April of 1944. And this is the outfit that found him 70 years later, found out what really happened to him. Joint POWMI Accounting Command, JPAC. Joint means all the services. So this is an organization that is devoted to finding those 83,000 people who were reported missing. And nobody ever really knew what happened to them. And they devote their efforts to finding these people from all of our wars. First of all, this is New Guinea. This is where the action took place. And for those of you that may be handicapped with a Harvard education, let me give you a little geography here. It's just north of Australia and just west of the Solomon Islands. And this was a heavy bomber, B-24, normally a 10-man crew. And they didn't fly like they did in Europe when they did these long-range missions into Germany. They kind of island hopped with the troops. And this was a short mission. They took off down there by the bottom by Port Moresby, right around here, and the airplane was shot down up here. He was a lead aircraft, and the aircraft started taking anti-aircraft fire, and pretty soon the left wing came off. Before that happened, he made a left turn, made a left turn over this bay out here. That was a tiny left turn, and started jettisoning his bombs. And then the airplane disintegrated and went down, and 2 airplanes behind him said there were 5 parachutes. When the 5 parachutes came out, the fighter escorts, P-38s, they had a habit of going down with the parachutes because the Japanese would come up and shoot at them they would scramble fighters just to go up and shoot the guys in the parachutes. So they went all the way down to the ground. They saw they did get down on the ground. They saw they were active and moving around, and then they departed. This is the B-24 Hot Garters. That was the name of his airplane. He was the gunner on the top gunner. He was 20 years old. This was his 8th combat mission. In 2001, some native hunters were in the bush and they found what they said was a large aircraft, and they notified the U.S. aid station there, some government people, that there was a large airplane in there, and they sent a team in. And this on the left is the symbol on the tail of the B-24s of the Jolly Roger. That was the name of their unit, named after one of their commanders. And you can see a recovered picture over here. There's the skeleton and the cross bombs. They identified it as part of his unit. And there's the final touchstone identifying the aircraft serial number. Now, this JPAC organization went into the bush 7 times. They made 7 trips to recover human remains. There's a look at the crash site. When it's cleared, you can see how dense that jungle is. And this is the actual crash site. 6 months later, that's what it looked like. Same spot. That's how fast that jungle grew. So every time they went in there, they took a crew of 7 Americans, a couple of MDs, archaeologists, DNA experts, 2 medical doctors, linguists, and probably 50 natives to clear the brush. And the archaeologists started sifting through everything. They had these boxes, just like archaeologists do over in the pyramids. They're shaking all the dirt out, and they dig down about 2 feet. And these are some of the items that they found in their quest to identify everyone. There's a pair of aviator glasses, some of the watches. They had just come up from Australia, and there's some Australian and New Zealand coins, a survival knife, a belt buckle, compasses, insignias. There's the engine, one of the engines that came off the airplane in the jungle. And here you see just to make them out over here is one of the Navy men at the tail of the aircraft before they cleared the jungle. There's the same scene, and you can see what the archaeologists set up here as they clear each area. They would dig down about 2 feet, sift out all the dirt, see what they could find, and there's the tail of the aircraft again. This is what they identified of my cousin, and they proceeded to, in this book, you see all of this stuff. This is what the DNA thing did. You can see down here, Carol Shockey, that's my sister, and William J. Mall, and each of those body parts were examined for DNA and signed by a PhD at the bottom, 99.999%, 99.9%, absolute positive identification. They wanted to make sure there's no doubt at all, this is him, and they did this for each of the members of the airplane. There were actually 12 on this airplane, normal crew of 10, but they had a photographer on board and another gentleman, and this proved that he went down with the airplane. He was not one of the men that parachuted out. One of my nephews went down there in August and took a picture at the final resting place there. It says, "Our brave young hero."
The fields that we went into, we were told that photographs were taken from 30,000 feet. And we're trying to go into fields in the darkness and not even knowing where the fences were. It's a scary feeling when you're coming, and especially in Normandy. We took off and we flew around the countryside to the various airports and picked up gliders and their, of course, with their tow planes. And we formed an aerial chain. That aerial chain was 135 miles long. If you can imagine that kind of an armada coming in. And as we approached the English Channel, we reduced our altitude down to about 800 feet. And lo and behold, in the English Channel, there was 7,000 ships. It looked like you could step from one to the next and never get your feet wet. I didn't have to try it, fortunately. And then for some strange reason, they went down to 500 feet just as we crossed Utah Beach, very famous name in World War II. And everybody who had a pop gun was firing at us. And these gliders are made out of plywood and canvas, and you could hear those bullets hitting our gliders. And they go poop, poop. That means they came in one side and out the back. We always waited for that second one to be sure that it went through and didn't hit anybody. I was well known in my outfit as lucky because I made 4 airborne missions, the most you can make. We were only supposed to make 3. That's the rules. And I came back from the 4th came back from the 4th mission. The colonel is standing there and he said, "Meyer, were you on that mission?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're only supposed to make 3. I said, "Now you tell me." All the firing was done. When I got down, I looked for my glider, looked it over rather, and I found 150 bullet holes in one glider. And I said to myself, thank God they weren't duck hunters. Because duck hunters knew that you had to lead your husband. Well, they would shoot us, and by the time the bullet got there, we were pretty well gone. So we were pretty safe.